My name is Dudley Brown. I'm the president of the National Association for Gun Rights. We also have on the line Steve Goodrick, who's our vice president in strategic programs for NAGR, and Steve and I and U.S. Senator Rand Paul will discuss a few items, but maybe the most important is what Michael Bloomberg's doing. Now, with the midterm elections just a few weeks away, this call could not have come at a better time. Tonight we intend to cover a few things. First, our recent successes in holding off Obama's first raft of gun control legislation in Congress. Second, the all-too-real threat of billionaire Michael Bloomberg's $50 million crusade against our gun rights. Then Senator Rand Paul will discuss his famous filibuster from last year. Then we'll outline our strategic battle plan for the 2014 midterm elections. And finally, we're going to open up the floor to everyone on the call for some live Q&A. I think that should be interesting. I've never done quite the same call, but I'm looking forward to this. So those of you who are just connecting with us tonight, thanks very much for joining in. We're glad you made it. Tonight we're privileged to be joined by U.S. Senator Rand Paul. Remember, at any time during this call, you can press 7 to make a contribution to this vital program. You'll be returned immediately to the call afterwards, so come right back. Now, on our agenda tonight, we'll explain how our grassroots mobilization last year has successfully held off Obama's entire raft of gun control legislation. We're going to talk about Michael Bloomberg's $50 million anti-gun war chest and what his agenda is. Senator Paul will be offering behind-the-scenes story of how he and a handful of senators thwarted Senator Harry Reid and President Obama's attacks on our Constitution. We'll outline our strategic battle plan for the 2014 midterm elections, and finally, we will look forward to the chance of a lifetime for many people with some live Q&A with our most committed supporters. Now, as the last few participants now are joining in, Senator Rand Paul, I'd like to give you the mic and say thank you for joining us. You can hear us, can't you?
I can, and thank you for having me. Are you ready?
We're ready.
All right. Well, thanks everybody for coming online tonight. I've made a consistent proposal in Washington to fight for your rights, whether the Second Amendment or the Fourth Amendment or the First Amendment. In fact, a lot of times we'll say, to those in the Republican Party, we need to be for the entire Bill of Rights. But about a year ago, I was like everybody else, shocked, by the shooting, the latest school shooting. And I have 3 boys, and I've watched them grow up, and, I was horrified by this, and I thought, gosh, I don't know how a parent could ever overcome the death of a child. And but I was worried that the emotions of the situation would sort of trump logic, and people would say, well, let's just, ban guns from law-abiding people, or let's make it so hard to own a gun that law-abiding people will have it. But, I was really kind of shocked and pleasantly surprised that as the debate unfolded, those of us who believe in the individual right of every individual, not only to own a gun, but to own things, that your right to own property should be inviolable, that it is a constitutionally protected right. I became surprised that as the argument wore on, we were actually winning the argument. As more and more brave defenders of the Second Amendment went on with Piers Morgan on CNN, we were winning the argument intellectually, which is really, really hard to fathom when you think about the emotions of the situation. And like I say, I put myself in the shoes of the parents who lost children, and I don't say that lightly. No one can ever really get in the shoes of those parents. But you can see how the emotions are stacked against us, and people want a quick reaction. People say, we just want something fixed. But the more and more people talked about it, the more and more people, I think, discovered that banning guns from law-abiding citizens or registering guns and having a big registry of the people who were honest enough to register guns wasn't going to do anything about deranged or mentally ill people who took guns that had actually even been registered or stole guns, which is what mostly happens with crime around our country, is that the guns are actually gotten in an illegal fashion. But the more and more the discussion unfolded, and several of these debates were on Piers Morgan, I was surprised that we were actually winning the debate. And as it went on more and more, I think that those who believe in the Second Amendment were winning. In fact, the argument became clearer and clearer that really if you want to stop people from having shootings in schools, instead of having a sign up that says, no guns here, the sign should say the opposite. It should say protected by Smith & Wesson. It should say on the door as you enter every school, we have a security guard that's armed. Whether he's there or she's there all the time, it should say that anyway. It's sort of a theory of most of us who are homeowners know that you need to have a sign in front of your house that says protected. You need a security sign because that security sign is a deterrent. And it's amazing as the argument developed, we actually got to a point where I think a lot of people said, you know what, self-defense against people that are crazy is the only way to go. It's the only way we'll protect our kids. And I think what's lost in this sometimes by the liberals is they think people who believe in the Second Amendment don't care about their children, don't care about these innocent kids that were killed. We actually care probably more than the other side. And the thing is we want to defend those kids. We don't want those kids to be killed by crazy people, but we just understand that our rights and ability to own something and that law-abiding people aren't the ones who do this. And that the laws, if you ban weapons, the people who obey the laws, or if you cause registration, the people who will be deterred will be the honest law-abiding people, but not the ones who are committing these heinous crimes.
Mm-hmm.
So I've been proud to be associated with the National Association of Gun Rights. I've been a leader in this. When the bill finally came up last year that was Republicans and Democrats coming together for more gun registration, more gun control, I was proud to be part of the filibuster that helped to stop that. And I was really just amazed by the debate because it's one of the few times when actually logic trumped emotion and we actually got to the point where people said, we need to do something about this, but gun control and gun registration is not the answer. And like I said, I was proud to be part of that. National Association of Gun Rights is part of that, but we can't let down our guard because we have people who are billionaires now spending money just like it's out of control. I think we'll talk a little more about some of the successes, but I've been proud of the National Association of Gun Rights for really defeating some of the state legislators, particularly in Colorado and other places, where billions of dollars have been spent or millions of dollars have been spent on the other side, and we've been able to counteract them. I'd like to thank everybody on the phone call for, contributing money and contributing time and thoughts and energy to defending the Second Amendment. And with that, I'd like to throw it back to Dudley and see where we go from here.
Well, Senator, thanks. That really last year's events were a true testament to fortitude gun owners in America. After the tragic shootings, the gun grabbers attacked on every front, proposing legislation to ban what they call assault weapons, limit magazine capacities, disarm veterans, and create an extensive gun registry database they ended up calling Toomey Mansion. As a response, we drummed up a massive grassroots opposition to all of these measures, unleashing a tidal wave of angry protests on Capitol Hill, which included 1.1 million hand-signed petitions. To me, that's an astounding number of contacts. 500,000 faxes, 940,000 emails directly into the Senate, and over 750,000 phone calls. Some really astounding numbers. And because of your commitment, people on this call, we were able to beat back those gun control schemes and thwart the Obama administration's attempts to blow a hole in our Second Amendment. And because of supporters like you, not a single piece of anti-gun legislation has passed at the national level on our watch. Now, obviously, we need that filibuster, and we need the U.S. senators to lead for us. And Senator Paul, with just a handful of U.S. senators, did the very difficult work of standing firm in the face of what is, let's face it, emotional opposition. So none of this, though, would have been possible without the support of people who are on this call. So please press 7 now if you want to make a contribution to ensure that we have the resources to really hang these votes around our opposition's neck in the next fight, because it's coming up, especially here in November. They need to be reminded who did what, how they voted. Now, Senator, would you like to give us a quick summary of how we did that filibuster, what that looked like?
Well, I think in the beginning it was a few committed people, but I think also encouraged by, thousands, if not tens of thousands of pro-Second Amendment people who really were writing and calling, and those petitions and those letters do make a difference. There are a few of us that are committed to the Second Amendment, whether we get an email or not. but I can tell you there are a lot of senators who are in the middle and can be influenced. And I would say that that's the majority up here are people who might be somewhat inclined to defend the Second Amendment, but once something emotional happens and the emotions are on the other side of the issue, you can see how a lot of people will buckle. And so, frankly, I think everybody standing together, I think the debate with those who went on Piers Morgan, all of those things really, to me, were pretty amazing because they gave backbone to a lot of senators who wouldn't have been strong enough to stand firm. And like I say, I really am proud of how those who stood up for the Second Amendment did. But I think it's important as we do stand up that we stand up and say we are also a group who wants to stop gun violence. We are the ones who say we've got kids too. Our kids go to school and we're not immune from wanting to stop these people. We just think we can do it without giving up our rights.
That's right. And giving up our rights wasn't going to stop them. It was going to stop law-abiding citizens from defending the kids, and law-abiding teachers and those we've really tasked with defending our kids. I mean, who wants to defend their kids more than their parents? Certainly.
Yeah. And I think a great way to think about this is think about terrorism and the people who brought down the planes on 9/11. I think what we should do, and I've been working on this also, is we should have a gun in every cockpit. And lately it's been harder and harder for pilots to get their permit to carry guns in the cockpit. But really we need to have a message out to every terrorist in the world that every American pilot will be armed. But really what we need is a message to all crazy, disturbed teenagers is that every teacher is going to be armed. And if we had guns in every school and we knew that, it would be a deterrent. And the other side just doesn't quite understand this, that law-abiding people deter the crazies. And some of these crazies, while they are, these mentally ill kids are doing things that to us seems insane, they have enough going on that they don't logically go to the police station. So they're not going to shoot policemen because they know the policeman will shoot back. They don't go to the sheriff's office. They show up at a school that has a sign on the front door, no weapons. And they know it's going to be a defenseless place. So I think that's an important message and part of what I think we began to win in the last debate.
Yeah. Well, and I think, as the saying goes, you don't see a lot of mass shootings at gun shows.
That's for sure.
Or police departments. That's well put. I think that what many people want to hear about is Michael Bloomberg and what he's doing. He's announced he's going to spend $50 million on these midterm elections in an all-out blitzkrieg against our Second Amendment. And of course, when we first started getting this call together, we actually saw even more news that they're doing it in congressional districts and Senate races and spending money. He's using a front group. It's called Every Town for Gun Safety. And we know what gun safety means for those people. It really means no guns. And they're $50 million.
Why don't you tell us a little bit about it? Didn't you guys have some success in some state Senate races in Colorado?
We did. We recalled 3 state senators in Colorado who had voted for a raft of gun controls at the behest of Mayor Michael Bloomberg. And not only did they vote for his stuff, they literally took marching orders from his people. And we just ran recalls and kicked them out of office. And that's exciting to hear. Did it change the full makeup of the legislature? No, but it certainly sent a message. And I can tell you that it's a bright shining beacon to politicians who are initially thinking about voting for gun control. Hey, this might not be good for my career. It certainly holds them accountable quickly.
I think the fact that you guys have put the money where it counts, and also that people on this phone call who have donated to gun rights, let them know a little bit about how their money was spent and what you guys did as far as spending money in Colorado.
Yeah. Well, and we directed virtually all of our campaign and time and effort into a grassroots effort within the recalls, both getting the signatures and then running the recall campaigns. And putting boots on the ground, supplying all these volunteers, and they came out of the woodwork when they're given a good plan. And that's what we're really laying out, not just in Colorado, but nationwide, a full plan to oppose Michael Bloomberg's, really his jihad is what it is, And we've laid it out, and what I'd like to do is ask our Vice President of Strategic Programs, Steve Goodrick. I think he's still on the line there.
I am.
To explain that battle plan and what that looks like in the coming weeks, really.
Well, this has been so informative, and I will try to keep my summary short because I know there are folks on the line that would like to speak to a possible president of the United States someday. The first thing that I want to do is go over our targeting criteria from which we do not diverge. First of all, in order to be a targeted state in our program, there must be a clear and distinct difference between the candidates on the Second Amendment issue. It must be provable, it must be evidentiary, it cannot be opinion, it must be based upon their voting records and their public statements. Secondly, we have to make in our own judgment the decision that the race will be a toss-up by Election Day, whether we do anything or not. We do not have money for landslides or lost causes. So we're looking for places where the gun rights supporter has the juice, has the capacity to get close to the finish line on their own. And finally, and this is something that is certainly unique to the National Association for Gun Rights, is we tend to target relatively small, lightly populated states, and it's a simple matter of arithmetic. A U.S. Senator from Montana has every bit as much throw weight as a U.S. Senator from New York or California. And the states that we tend to target tend to be more rural, they tend to have a higher density of gun ownership and gun rights activism. So it's just a simple matter of economics. It is a better investment of the folks that are on this line. You know that your investment is going further and is accomplishing more in the states that we target because we also very closely look at the economics involved. Now getting into it, first of all, I just wanted to say once again, you can press 7 at any time to support this program in its entirety. And I would urge you to do so and to do so quickly, early, and often. If there are any of these states that I'm going to discuss here that you specifically have an interest in, then by all means, when you press 7, please tell the representative on the line that you are most interested in your funding going into whatever state that you're talking about. Now, we would like to have as much latitude as management as possible for Dudley and our team to make the on-the-ground decisions at the very last minute based on facts on the ground. But it would be very helpful to us to know those states that are most important to you. So please do let us know that when you when you press 7. The first state I want to mention is North Carolina. There's no question that it is going to be one of those highly contested Senate races in the country. It's former House Speaker Tom Tillis against incumbent Senator Kay Hagan. Hagan is very vulnerable. There's no question about that. And she is vulnerable because of her vote for gun control legislation. The state of Louisiana is an unusual state. They will be making their first jungle primary votes when the rest of us are voting in the November general election. It is not clear who the runoff will be between Senator Mary Landrieu and which Republican will win the nomination to go up against her in the runoff. However, it is very clear that whoever that is very likely to be a very strong 100% supporter of the Second Amendment. Arkansas is a state that we're very proud to talk about. It pits Congressman Tom Cotton against the incumbent Mark Pryor, who has an extensive record of voting against the Second Amendment. That is, Senator Pryor does. And Arkansas is a perfect example of the type of states we like to target. Number one, there's a very distinct difference between the candidates' positions on the issue. Number two, it is going to be a close horse race. And number three, there are a lot of hunters, gun owners, and Second Amendment supporters in Arkansas. In Alaska, it definitely makes sense to target a state that is as cheap to operate in as Alaska. It hits Senator Mark Begich against Dan Sullivan. Mark Begich just barely won his previous election, and he is highly vulnerable. Another state we're watching very closely is Montana. It hits Republican Steve Daines against Democrat Amanda Curtis. That will be a very key election, which could determine the control of the United States Senate. In Colorado, Republican Congressman Cory Gardner is challenging the current Senator Mark Udall. Mark Udall is undoubtedly vulnerable and was a supporter of the so-called Toomey Manchin background check scheme. There are a number of other states that we're keeping a very close eye on and we think could be close, and we have confidence that gun owners could tip the balance at the polls. In Georgia, former Governor Republican David Perdue is facing off against a candidate hand-selected by President Obama himself, Michelle Nunn. In Iowa, Republican Johnny Ernst is dueling with Democrat Bruce Braley for another key open seat race that is also shaping up to be a Donnybrook. And we are also keeping a very close eye on the Senate race in Nebraska, which pits Republican Ben Sasse against Democrat David Gomina. So that is where the situation is right now. I want to emphasize that we are monitoring the situation on the ground in all of these states. Things change very quickly, and as they change, we will be shifting funding where it will do the most good. So if you would like to support this entire program as a whole or any one of these states, I would urge you to press 7 at this point. The Senate, quite frankly, is our number one target. That is where, with all due respect to Senator Rand Paul, the Senate is where the infection is in our body politic, and we are the white blood cells, and we intend to go where the disease is.
Well put, Steve, and I like the way you put it. I never heard that. That is where the infection is, and it's also where we can make some most gains. It's also a place that we have to ratify treaties, such as the 81 Small Arms Treaty, and or of course reject it. And we've always been building against that. So I'd like to thank Steve for doing that. I want to open up the floor to some questions. So if anyone here would not want to ask a question either to Senator Paul or myself, just press 0 right now. So as the first round of questions are being lined up, I think some people already figured that out in advance because I can see that we have a couple there. I want to remind everybody of the importance of your support. We need the primary focus on our investments to go directly to our top tier Senate states that Steve listed there. So to help chip into for the cost of these programs and of course for this conference call, it's not inexpensive to do these. You can press 7 right now. This conference call literally costs a lot of money to set up, but we need to get the word out right away. And we honestly don't have much time for things like mail right now. It's just weeks away. So we've had more than 6,000 people on this call, and it fluctuates a little bit. But so let's start with our first question. Let me see if I can figure out this one here. It is what's that? Okay, so it's Jerry. And it's live. Okay, Jerry, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Jerry, you're from Michigan, is that right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, go ahead, ask a question.
Well, hi, Dudley, and hello, Senator Paul. My question is, I'm just one person. What can I do personally to stand up to this threat?
Good question, Larry. One we get here quite often. The first thing you can do is press 7. Write us a check, help us with these important programs. When we start throwing around numbers like $50 million, this can start to seem like a David versus Goliath kind of battle. But David won that battle. Our group is made up of a lot of Davids, and as you can see from the meetings we have online, our Facebook presence, everyone on this call is just one person. But if our program binds us together, well, toward one end goal, with one winning strategy, we can win. So here's my answer. If you stay informed about the issue, inform your friends, talk about our group at gun range, at work, distribute literature, you'll forward our emails, get out the vote, and contribute to us financially. That's really all we can ever ask. Senator, you want to add to that?
Well, the only thing I'd say is if each of the 6,000 on the phone call gave a $100 average, you got $600,000. That's enough to make a difference in a close race. It's not enough to win a race by itself. But $600,000 put in can be a big infusion. And one thing I'd like to mention is there are 3 close races where we had a gun vote this year. I forced a gun vote in the committee, and Landrieu, Begich, and Pryor all voted against my amendment, which would have gotten rid of federal laws that punish people for having a gun in the parking lot or inside a post office. And this is probably one of the few gun votes we had this year, but 3 people in vulnerable seats. Begich, if we were to get $600,000 from this phone call, put it all into Alaska, you can probably defeat Mark Begich and get a pro-Second Amendment senator.
That's right. Defeat the accidental senator who really is there by accident. and because of a previous U.S. Senator in court, and replace it with a good vote. That would be helpful to you, would it not, Senator?
Absolutely.
All right, great question. All right, so let's go to Nathan in Florida. Go ahead, Nathan.
Oh, yes, my question is for Senator Paul. Senator Paul, how would you defend our Second Amendment as president?
Well, the first thing we would do is we wouldn't add any executive orders that would infringe upon the Second Amendment. If there are any executive orders that we could undo that infringe upon the Second Amendment, we'd do that. I wouldn't sign any legislation that would infringe on the Second Amendment, and also would not sign any treaties. You know, right now the treaty was actually signed, the Small Arms Treaty, the United Nations Small Arms Treaty was signed by President Obama's administration. Fortunately, it doesn't become law unless the Senate ratifies it. But a pro-Second Amendment president would have never even bothered to sign it. We would lobby against and use all international bodies to lobby against things like this. There's quite a bit that a president could do. I think you can also use the bully pulpit to talk about how Republicans, conservatives, those who defend the Second Amendment are against gun violence and also for the Second Amendment at the same time.
That's a good question, and the answer is right. We need a constitutional president who understands and has the guts to stand up and say no when no needs to be said, regardless of how loud they're saying it or how emotional the situation is. Let's go to the next call from Colorado. I'd like to see that. Heather in Colorado.
Hi guys, and thanks for doing this call. I was wondering what we're expecting Mayor Bloomberg to spend all of this money on.
Yeah. Well, I mean, $50 million can buy a lot. You know, if I didn't make that clear earlier, you know, it's going to take a lot for us to come back from that much money. You can pretty much buy everything. Money goes directly to fuel anti-gun media. I mean, they go out and buy TV commercials, and there's almost no end to the number of commercials you can buy. The radio time you can buy, flyers to stuff mailboxes. You can pay volunteers. Literally, Senator, that's what happened in Colorado. They literally used Bloomberg's millions to try to win elections by paying volunteers, shipping them in from other states, buying all the media up. It's why we want to encourage everybody here to press 7, because we want you to join in on this. We may not be able to make $50 million, but darn well, we got to be smart how we bring it together and band together, and the more the merrier. So press 7 if you want to support this. Let's go to our next call. Okay, Lori in Texas.
Hello.
Hi, Lori. We can hear you.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you. Go ahead.
Okay, great. What exactly will happen if the billionaire gets his way?
Senator, you want to field that?
Well, you know, I think some of it's unknown, but I think his policy and his proposals would be for more gun registration, more gun control, more outright banning of certain types of guns. And what we've found from most liberals is they don't know the front end of the gun from the butt of the gun. They think that if a gun looks scary, they want to ban it. And so I would be very worried if he gets his way that we would have less access to our constitutional right, which is the right to own a gun. And it concerns me that people who think you might not be allowed to own a gun may think that certain language should be limited and that certain other activities should be limited. So really it's a belief in big government. And it's really a belief that disdains the rights of the individual. And so I am concerned. Can I tell you exactly what he would do? No, but I feel certain it wouldn't be good. And I think that because he has so much wealth, we need to be able to try to combat that. And most of the contributions, I don't know if the gun rights can tell us, but I think most contributions are smaller donors to the gun rights groups. And so we need lots of people giving $10 and $20 a piece to try to combat somebody who can give $50 million in one check.
Not that we would not cash your check if you wrote a $50 million check. Let's make that clear, of course. But yes, as the Bible says, the rope of many strands cannot be broken, and that's the strength we have in a large number of smaller donors. So we always appreciate that. So we also like going to your friends and getting your friends to join the organization and be a part of it. I think I can say with a great degree of certainty that if Mayor Bloomberg had his way, there is no end to the number of gun controls he would run. I know what stopped him in Colorado was he just didn't have the votes for some of the more egregious gun controls, including, let's say, an assault weapons ban. But you can bet if he's got the votes, he's going to do it. And that's what he's seeking to get right now in this election, is the votes to pass whatever gun control he can pass. Certainly an assault weapons ban. Most likely a national registration scheme that requires a long waiting period and like the state of Virginia that actually stopped you from buying a gun more than one a month. Gun rationing. I personally think one gun a month should be a requirement. You have to buy at least one gun a month, not a restriction. So let's go to John in South Dakota. Can you hear me, John?
Yes. I wondered why Bloomberg carries a gun himself and he don't think anybody else should. And also, the NRA campaigned against Tom Daschle here in South Dakota. He was an anti-gunner, and we gave him the boot.
I think that's a good point about Bloomberg. Is you've got a lot of Hollywood liberals and you've got a lot of East Coast liberals who travel with protection all the time. And the irony is they want average, ordinary people who don't have a lot of money, who aren't famous. They want us to put up with criminals, but they're more than happy to have armed guards protecting them. So hypocrisy has never sort of bothered liberals, but I agree with you that it's hypocrisy. I wanted to thank the gun rights folks for having me on. Unfortunately, I got to get off to another meeting. But thank you for letting me be on, and I wish you guys the best of luck, and hope that you can continue to successfully defend the Second Amendment.
Thank you, Senator. We appreciate that, and I know everybody on the call. We appreciate it. We'll just keep going with a few questions. We'll go to Richard in Burbank, California. Richard, can you hear me?
Richard Mullick?
Yes, sir.
Yes. I've been thinking about the ISIS threat and how we could use that to fight Bloomberg's $50 million investment. If our population was faced with either accepting $50 million of Bloomberg's money so he can put people in the Congress who are gun grabbers, it seems to me at this point in our history that would be a very poor time for our population to lose their guns.
Well, Richard, I think you're right. ISIS or ISIL, whatever you prefer to call them, have clearly shown their intention to come to the United States. And I just had a phone call this morning from one of my friends out on the East Coast who said exactly the same thing, that we should be making that point. I think we have a couple of times on Facebook, and the point being that we want the message to terrorists to be, you come to our country, and this is not a place where it's very safe for people to commit atrocities. You'll likely be confronted by multiple citizens with handguns, with rifles in their vehicles, and certainly with the will and the knowledge on how to defend our country. I think it also leads back to those questions about World War II. When we went to war, what do? We had people who knew how to shoot. Those countries with absolutely positively no private ownership of firearms, or very little, were begging for our help. So let's go to Lois in Boise, Idaho.
Oh, hi.
Hello there.
Yes, hi, this is Lois Belleville, and I am concerned about how Obama goes behind the scenes and goes after gun store owners and buys up all the ammunition And he goes down to backs and nobody, but it's not on the news, hardly ever, and nobody does anything about this stuff. It really concerns me. Because we're from Idaho, and if they try to take away guns, they're in for a big problem here.
Ma'am, I like your attitude, Lois, and you're right. They are in for a big problem, but unfortunately, government agents don't ask permission, and they don't usually do it in one fell swoop. They put the frog in the cool pot of water, and then they turn the heat up. I think you're all wrong about one point. There are some people doing about it. National Association for Gun Rights used, last year, in fact, we spent more than all other gun groups combined lobbying Congress and opposing the gun controls there in Congress and through the administration. Not just the UN Small Arms Treaty, but all the power grabs by the ATF. In fact, working on a letter today even to help members of Congress question the ATF about Class 3 transfers and some of the items. Really, the list goes on. We all know about what Eric Holder and the Department of Justice have done. Really almost flaunted the law and gone against the law with the Fast and Furious scandal and giving firearms across the border to drug dealers. That's the kind of thing we're seeing all across the board. And really, we need members to hold them accountable. Now, honestly, the best way to hold them accountable is to put more members of Congress there, is to hold the members of Congress accountable. And that's why we want you to be a part of it. Press 7 right now if you want to contribute to that program. We think that's the number one answer is having good, solid constitutionalists standing firm on this. So let's go to Paul in Connecticut. Can you hear me, Paul?
Yeah, I can hear you. I'd like to ask the senator if he ever runs into Mr. Blumenthal and Mr. Chris Murphy, who are my senators in Connecticut, to tell them come back home. I wish it was the old way we recall these guys, because I feel that any senator or any congressman that attacks our Bill of Rights in any way shouldn't be a representative of our people in our state. Period.
Well, Paul, we agree, and the truth is, there in Connecticut, and I was just there in Connecticut this summer for the first time I'd ever been there. You have a beautiful state. I'm sorry that many of the liberals have overrun parts of your state. The only real solution is to toss them out of office, and that's not a small task when you talk about a U.S. senator, especially in a very liberal state in many ways. I'm not sure even Senator Paul has a good solution for that, except for really to take over the U.S. Senate and keep the House in some constitutionalist hands, so that we can oppose these kind of gun controls at a federal level and really put the shackles on an administration. Of course, we need at some point to elect a good president. Now, you notice Senator Paul did not say he was running for president, because he can't legally say that, and that's really getting the cart before the horse. But I encourage Senator Paul to run, and I think right now he actually stands a chance of winning. So we know where he'll stand on our rights, and we know as a member of the National Association for Gun Rights, he's all in for the Second Amendment. It's good to hear. So thank you. Bill in Ohio. Bill, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. And I was talking to you just a moment ago, and my question is this: if Bloomberg gets his way, the citizens in this country will find themselves being unarmed, and if they find themselves having to defend themselves against criminals, they'll be at a terrible disadvantage, because the criminals don't care about laws, and they can go to underground gunsmiths, and they can these underground gunsmiths can can manufacture and construct weapons that are as good or better than what you can buy. And it just seems to me that Bloomberg simply is not thinking logically. And also, if you go along the border, my understanding is that ISIS, Al-Qaeda, and people from nations like Chechnya and Dagestan are trying to infiltrate, and some of them have already gotten into this country, and I just see nothing but a tremendously dangerous situation, and I feel that Bloomberg, with his gun ban, is just showing complete and total disregard for the people in this country.
Well, we agree with that. I think what Mayor Bloomberg has largely shown us is that he's happy to be defended by security agents who are armed, but he doesn't want you to be able to. And many times in the last 20 years as gun lobbyists, I've confronted politicians who have that elitist attitude that somehow their lives are worthy of defending, yet they really aren't solidly in favor of anybody's right to keep and bear arms except themselves and people who would defend them. We believe Dianne Feinstein and Barbara Boxer both have armed security, and that's really just telling people you peasants and peons shouldn't be allowed to defend yourself, but I'm worth more than that. Don't like that. We got time for, I think, 2 more calls here. Mike in Coral Springs, Florida.
Well, hi.
Get in an echo there, Mike.
Okay, Dudley. Can you hear me all right?
Yes, sir.
Great. Well, Senator Rand Paul was talking about Democrats not understanding about the situation concerning the Second Amendment. I think they do, but I believe they are pushing for Agenda 21. For those who don't know what that's about or haven't followed it, Agenda 21 is something to turn over the rights of registering your guns with the United Nations and then being able to be taxed by the United Nations and so forth. That's just a little bit about it. And I think this is a huge plan to further his personal transformation of America into socialist state. What I wanted to ask you was, I wonder why, or can you speculate on why Michael Bloomberg is so far advanced into the $50 million for gun control when he himself is a Jewish person, George Soros is a Jewish person, and they're pushing for socialism. I don't understand that. They have foregone Israel's need for protection and us being an ally along with this president.
Yeah, Mike, share your sentiment. I think for the next question, we're going to talk briefly about the UN Small Arms Treaty, so we'll kick that to the next question. But I will say that this concept that Michael Bloomberg has, he truly believes that guns in the hands of only police officers is literally the only way to make a safe America. But if you look at his policies, he doesn't believe you should have the freedom to have a big gulp or for that matter, food with too much salt. And I don't think many Americans agree with that sentiment. Even if it's smart not to drink a full big gulp, should you have the freedom to drink that? I think so. But speaking of the UN Small Arms Treaty, let's just bring on that question. Robert in North Carolina, if you want to ask your question.
Yes, let me preface it by saying, first of all, I live for the day when we fire Kay Hagan. But
yes, sir.
My question is, where are we with the UN Small Arms Treaty? I know it was voted down, but my memory serves me right. There were like 40 U.S. senators that voted in favor of surrendering our firearms to the control of foreign nations or United Nations. Is that issue dead now, or where are we with that?
Well, no, sir. In fact, that vote that you're talking about was actually a non-binding vote. It literally had no force of law, and I think since there was no law being done on either side on that issue, really, on that vote, because why would you vote on a non-binding, put pressure on a non-binding issue? I don't think it really showed you where the U.S. Senate is on that issue. I think there are a number of weak-kneed Republicans we've always been concerned about. Senator John McCain is always at the top of the list anytime anyone talks about a U.S. senator who could cave and go the other direction. But then again, there are others. We've had Susan Collins has been questionable. There's also some Republicans who have turned the wrong direction. Senator Pat Toomey certainly last year took kind of a bizarre turn, and so we're very concerned that the UN Small Arms Treaty, if the elections went the wrong way, could gather the votes. Now, where we are is the administration signed it. First Secretary John Kerry agreed and signed it, and then handed it to the president essentially, and then it's given up to ratify by the U.S. Senate. It can sit there for any amount of time. In fact, I believe it's only 3 days that the president needs, and before he can approve and it starts the timer. Harry Reid puts it on the docket. 3 days later, the vote happens. It's one of the reasons we are always at the ready on this issue. We think that's the biggest gun grab in America ever, is giving that kind of broad power to the United Nations. And so if you want to fight that, you can press 7 and join and participate, donate to us, and we're using that to build a wall of support, of opposition to this UN Arms Trade Treaty. So I think that's a good question, and but that vote that happened last year really didn't. We don't think was a great vote to judge who will vote on it when the pressure's really on. I think we already asked that question. So let's see here. We'll go to Nick in Montana. We'll take a few more here. Nick, go ahead, Nick.
My question is, why do people in leadership like Senators Feinstein, Toomey, Schumer, and Barbara Boxer, and I know that Michael Bloomberg isn't a senator, but he was ex-mayor of New York, but he's in a position of power and leadership in the country. Why are they not prosecuted for their really hard efforts to disarm the population?
Well, I'm sorry. The truth is they are U.S. senators. They are elected, and so they can vote however they like until someone tosses them out of office. It's what our program's all about. That's why we want you to press 7, because we want you to be a part of getting rid of them. There's not much more you can do to a U.S. senator than kick them out of office. Filing, I believe the suggestion was to file treason charges or something, but it doesn't work. Never has worked. Let's go to, real quickly, he's been waiting a while, I think, here. Andrew in Big Springs, Texas. Don't know where that is, but except that it's in Texas. That's not very descriptive, is it, Andrew?
No, it isn't.
You got a big state. What's your question, Andrew?
Well, originally it was for the senator, but since he's departed,
he's not dead. Yeah.
Well,
but you can ask that question. I can answer it for you. My call screener said.
The original question I was going to ask is, with the tenor of everything being the way it is in anti-gun, are we going to have to go through another lame duck session like we did earlier to get our voice heard? Because
that's right. Big question is, should we go through a lame duck session? We don't know yet. U.S. Senator Harry Reid is really driving that, and he holds all the cards there. He's the one who decides what bills get a hearing and when the vote comes up, and he decides what amendments are allowed. He's really the linchpin on all this gun control. There's another question here: why do we work with the NRA? And the fact is, the NRA is the reason Harry Reid is a U.S. senator. They defended him in 2010 and called him a champion of the Second Amendment. We don't think he's a champion. In fact, if you look at what happened in 2013, Senator Reid is the man who opened up the floodgates to the gun control that we had to fight, and what led to that Senator Paul's filibuster and fight. So let me We hope that we don't have a lame duck session. We're going to work very hard to avoid that. We have a lot of U.S. senators who are trying to tie that up so it doesn't happen. We don't think that's fair to the American people and certainly not fair to our Constitution. So with that, I want to thank everybody's participation. You can still press 7 if you'd like to be to join and be a part of this and contribute to the organization and contribute to our program here for 2014. We only have a few weeks left, so we hope you'll do everything you can right now. And we thank you for being on this call, and God bless.